Hello, everyone. We'll be getting started in just 1 minute.
Okay, guys, sorry, Restream was a little stuck. We are officially live.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Untitled Chapter, Interim Public Policy Director with the ACLU of Maryland. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Welcome to this press conference. Today, the Senate Finance Committee is hearing Senate Bill 692, the Cannabis Legalization and Reparations for the War on Drugs Act. And today, the ACLU is releasing new poll data showing that racial justice provisions to repair harm done from the war on drugs actually strengthen support for marijuana legalization. Senate Bill 692, sponsored by Senator Jill P. Carter, who will be with us a little later to speak today, holistically addresses the negative impacts of the war on marijuana, including stopping the practice by police of using the odor of marijuana as the only probable cause or justification to perform a warrantless search. We are live streaming on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter from the ACLU of Maryland's accounts. Please keep yourselves muted if you are not speaking. And today we will be hearing from Untitled Emanuel, Interim Public Policy Director for the ACLU of Maryland, Davon Love, Director of Public Policy for Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle, Senator Jill P. Carter, sponsor of Senate Bill 692, and we will also have a video of Josette Blocker, the aunt of DeMonte Ward Blake and a leader with the Maryland Coalition for Justice and Police Accountability. In addition, we will close with questions and answers about the poll data and the bill. And joining us for that is Jessica Reese, who's the Managing Director of Bully Pulpit Interactive, which led this poll. And with that, we will bring up our poll data. Let me share my screen and then mute myself.
Thanks, Meredith. Really excited to share the results here with you all today. It clearly shows that racial justice provisions that aim to repair the harm from the war on drugs that we've been advocating for actually strengthen Marylanders' support for cannabis legalization. So looking forward to sharing those results with you all. You can go to the next slide, Rand. So as we are pretty much we're aware of already is that a majority of Maryland voters overwhelmingly support legalization of adult use cannabis, with 70% of registered voters supporting the change and only 29% opposing. Support is high and crosses across party lines, with 80% of Democrats supporting, a majority of 69% of independents supporting legalization, and nearly half, which is 48% of Republicans supporting legalization. Go to the next slide. Expanding legislation to include measures to protect citizens and address the impact of the drug enforcement policies has the potential to strengthen support further. Majority say that some criminal justice reform components, including stopping police from stopping the practice of police using the odor of marijuana as the only probable cause or justification to perform warrantless search, would actually make them more likely to support legalization or would have no impact on their support. Indeed, even among those who do not initially support legalization, over 1/3 say that eliminating warrantless searches on the grounds of marijuana odor alone would make them more likely to support legalization. Across the board, these elements under the elements under debate in the state legislature generate more support for legalization. 66% of voters are more likely to support legalization if it includes allowing previous marijuana-related convictions to be canceled and allowing other low-level marijuana possession convictions to be resentenced under current sentencing guidelines. And 12% say that this has no impact on their support, while over 1/3 35% of voters who do not currently support legalization say that this provision would actually make them more likely to support it. 65% of voters are more likely to support legalization if it includes stopping the practice of by police using the odor of marijuana as the only cause or justification to perform a warrantless search. 13% say this has no impact on their support, but nearly a third of voters, and exactly 32%, say that who do not currently support legalization say that this makes them more likely to do so. And 61% of voters are more likely to support legalization if the package includes making sure that the legal use of marijuana cannot be the basis to deny people housing, child custody, or negatively impact their parole or probation status. While 13% say that this provision has no impact on their support, 1 in 5 voters that currently do not support legalization, which is 20%, say that this element actually makes them more likely to support legalization. And here are the visuals. Bolstering Marylanders' views is the belief that legalizing cannabis helps to repair the harm done by the war on drugs, and that the tax revenue can be used should be used in the very communities that are most impacted by the harmful punitive drug policies. In a balanced head-to-head argument, 65% of Maryland voters side with proponents of legalization who make the racial justice argument, and only 32% agree with detractors. This suggests that not only do racial justice aspects motivate voters, but also that support for legalization is durable and can stand up to attacks. And so looking at this side by side, supporters say for decades, the war on drugs targeted Black and brown communities, adding to mass incarceration and destroying families. It's time to legalize marijuana and repair the harm done by the war on drugs, using marijuana-related tax revenue to strengthen the communities most impacted while making sure that marijuana industry works for communities. So 65% of respondents said that they agree with this statement. And then opponents say legalizing marijuana has been a disaster around the country. In states that have legalized marijuana, emergency room visits for cannabis use have doubled, and there has been an increase in property-related violent crime. And that tax revenue that was promised to schools and public health programs is going to be the only government bureaucracy Marylanders, tax revenue that was promised to schools and public health programs is going only to government bureaucracy, and Maryland should not repeat the mistakes of other states. Only 32% of individuals agreed with this. Support for legalization is not only high, it is strengthened by elements currently being considered in legislation before the General Assembly this session, and is grounded in Marylanders' sense of racial justice. Elements that recognize the full legality of cannabis and remove past convictions and the current usage as ways to harm Marylanders actually appeal and broaden support. And that is all for our summary.
Thank you so much, Yanette. And next we will hear from Davon Love, Director of Public Policy at Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle.
Greetings. Again, Davon Love, Director of Public Policy, Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. I'm here to just talk a little bit about HB 692, and I want to focus particularly on the public safety argument, because I think, unfortunately, given the rise of violent crime throughout the state, there's, generally reticence around policies that are perceived by some elements of Maryland to be, soft on crime, excuse me, and to not, and to be moving in the opposite direction of supporting law enforcement and addressing this. And one of the things I think is very important for folks to be clear about is that law enforcement in many respects waste a lot of resources and goodwill with the community pursuing the policy of marijuana prohibition. So when you think about the fact that there are thousands upon thousands of people who are typically arrested and incarcerated, especially given the fact that Black people are overrepresented in the numbers of those who are arrested and incarcerated, this is not translated to public safety outcomes. And so I think it's very important in this polling that is being released, I think helps to further substantiate this claim. And so I think it's going to be very important that we urge our legislators to resist much of the narratives that circulate around questions of public safety as a rationale not to support this piece of legislation. And in fact, that the way, or what these polls have suggested, which is that Marylanders actually would support this policy more, given the fact, support this policy more if things like odor searches and things that would lead to greater interactions with, or more frequent interactions with law enforcement, the fact that this poll demonstrates that Marylanders would be more supportive of legislation that addresses this. And so I just want to emphasize that fact as an important element as to why it's important that we move forward with SB 692.
Thank you so much, Devon. And next we will hear from Senator Jill P. Carter. Are you ready, Senator?
I'd like to thank the ACLU for this polling data and research on this critical issue for Maryland. Maryland needs to make ending the mass incarceration of Black people a priority, and this is one step in that direction. According to a 2020 ACLU report, 50% of drug arrests in Maryland were for marijuana. In most counties, Black people are more likely to get arrested for marijuana at double the national average. In places like Queen Anne County, Black people are 8 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana. Just last summer, we saw on Ocean City Boardwalk where Black people, young Black people, were not only disproportionately arrested for vaping where they should have been cited, but they were brutalized by law enforcement, and this happens all too often. Since Black people have been the ones disproportionately impacted by enforcement of marijuana prohibition, we should be the primary economic beneficiaries. For far too long, the deck has been stacked against Black people in Maryland, both criminally and economically, and this is our opportunity to right those wrongs. Just last year, this body passed historic police reforms, and for years before that, we made efforts to address the myriad of ways that some of our laws were making some communities, particularly Black communities, the poor, immigrants, and persons with disabilities, and many others, less safe. Senate Bill 692 is a continuation of this body's work because it recognizes that the faux war on drugs has caused harm to marginalized populations. And this is a proposal that will begin to prepare that harm and prevent future harm. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Carter. We're going to close with a video of Josette Blocker, who has a very devastating personal story to share about the impact that an odor search had on her nephew, DeMonte Ward Blake. And after that, we will take questions about the poll data.
On October 17, 2019, DeMonte Ward Blake was stopped. It was a traffic stop regarding suspended tags. Any officer got into conversation that kind of like escalated, and the officer I want to say that he escalated by not listening to my nephew make his concerns because of the goddaughter that was in the car with him at the time, his girlfriend's daughter. And so the officer got irate and in his feelings, I think he took it on a personal note and then escalated the suspended tag situation to, oh, I smell marijuana, I need to check this vehicle. Unfortunately for us, that stopped. Just created a bad situation for Devontae. That stopped because of the officer's inability to de-escalate the situation between he and Devontae. Allowed him to take circumstances into his own hands, and he threw my nephew down on the ground head first, which caused him to have a broken nose. They broke his neck and then broke his back. Just because you smelled marijuana, just because the tags were registered or suspended, it took all of that. Gosh, when you sit back and you think, and it's like, gosh, it's been so many days, like it's been years, and this thing still hurts like it was yesterday. We're bordering Washington, D.C., we're bordering Virginia. Now, if Virginia is saying we're not going to mess with you on an odor, then we got to get on board too. Virginia, okay? The purpose of these legislators is to help the communities. So what better way to show that you are trying to do something in the community than to provide that funding? Why are we paying taxes to send these young Black and brown men to jail? It's time to pass the Cannabis Legalization and Reparations for the War on Drugs Act, Senate Bill 692.
We will now take any questions that you have about the bill, about the new poll data released today. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat, or you can speak up. We have a question.
Hi, it's Ovita.
Oh, go ahead, Ovita.
Yeah. Given that there are a couple of bills out there dealing with marijuana legalization, and a couple that actually have support from leadership, I'm curious whether there are certain provisions from Senator Carter's bill that you would like to see added to those other pieces of legislation if they happen to move and your bill does not move, Senator Carter.
Thank you for the question. All of it. And the first thing I want to say is that I vehemently disagree with the concept that we should just move to referendum with no policy attached to it. Absolutely, that's the cart before the horse. If we're serious about equity and we're serious about repairing the damage to our communities, then we have to be serious about the policy first. And it has to go first before any legalization, because the motivation for me with moving to legalization is being able to create opportunities for Black and brown people and poor people, and to make right what we've done to people in communities with the war on drugs, the false war on drugs. And so the answer to the question is the criminal justice aspects of my bill are essential. I also feel like the front end of the process, that deciding who gets licenses and having it heavily weighted toward people that are local and community-based is critically important. And I also think that the aspect of the bill that creates 60% of revenues, making sure that they're directed toward the most harmed communities, I think all of those are critically important. And I don't believe I could support any legislation that doesn't include those things.
And if I could just add to that, to be more specific about those criminal justice elements of Senator Carter's bill, it's absolutely necessary and critical that we eliminate all criminal penalties associated with marijuana-related offenses. There's no reason why once we legalize, we should still be criminalizing people for possessing over the personal use amount, or still sending people to prison for possession with intent to distribute. Those should be treated with civil offenses, similar to operating a business without a license, and should not be something that sends somebody to jail or disrupts their life. And when we're talking about clearing previous marijuana-related offenses, it's absolutely critical that we expand the scope to include other convictions like possession with intent to distribute, growing, drug paraphernalia. We can't just expunge simple possession when we know that there have been thousands of people who have either been improperly charged with possession with intent to distribute when they would have been more appropriately charged with possession, or the fact that even the ones who were selling marijuana were for small amounts and they were substance dealers, meaning that they weren't making a whole lot of money and that they were selling it to get by. And now we're going to allow wealthy Marylanders, who are most likely going to be white, to continue to profit off of lawfully selling marijuana. And it makes no sense to still levy these kind of penalties against people, and then also allow these people who have already been convicted to continue to be saddled with those criminal convictions. And then, of course, prohibiting the odor searches is also incredibly critical. And including vacature. Vacature goes beyond just expungement and actually undoes the adjudication. And if we mean what we say when we're saying that we were wrong in how we handled criminalization of marijuana, then we need to honor that by making sure that we're actually clearing people of these records and not delaying it any further.
Thanks.
Thank you. We also have a question in the chat for Senator Carter. Have you received any feedback from state's attorneys?
So I haven't looked at the state's attorney's testimony. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm fairly certain they're not likely to be in full support of some of the criminal justice aspects. But I think that any opposition that they might have should be overcome for many of the reasons that Ms. Emanuel just stated, that we can't move toward ending prohibition to legalization without making sure that we cure the damage from criminalization. And so it has to be comprehensive and as easy as possible for people that have arrest convictions, or even arrest and convictions that were based upon marijuana, initiated from marijuana. They all have to be dealt with. So I haven't seen the state's attorney's opposition. I don't think that their opinions should be controlling on this matter, though.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think it's just really important to just look at the numbers, right? Criminalizing marijuana has not been an effective public safety strategy tool. And so if the state's attorneys are committed to actually being able to prosecute those who actually are violent offenders in our community, then they need to shift their focus from marijuana and actually on those violent offenders. And when we look at, for example, Prince George's County, between 2018 to 2019, there were nearly 3,000 arrests for possession of marijuana and only led to 20 convictions. But that same year, police only had an 18% clearance rate on all violent crime. So the focus has been completely on the wrong things. And actually, I think that if they are if we're all concerned about violent crime, then they would be in line with Senator Carter's bill and support it, especially prohibiting those odor searches.
Thank you both. Are there any other further questions? All right, we'll be sending out a press release, including the memo on the poll data right after this press conference. It'll be available from the ACLU of Maryland's website, www.aclu-md.org. Many thanks to Jessica Rees from Bully Pulpit for joining us today. And if we do have some follow-up questions about the poll data, please reach out to me. I'll put my direct email in the chat. And we can respond to your inquiries. Today, again, is the hearing for SB 692 in the Senate Finance Committee. So it's a very important day. And we look forward to working with you all going forward on this and doing it the right way. Thank you.